I don't remember ever being so arrogantly treated over just tuition fees. As I confronted Lisa at her home, she smirked and pushed me out the door. Her face was the nastiest I'd ever seen. Michael, standing behind her, also wore a sleazy grin. Even if it's just tuition, $60,000 is a lot of money. I was shocked at their attitude, as if I was being unreasonable about money. And there, by the entrance, probably Michael's, the moment I saw the brand new golf bag, I wondered if I had gone wrong somewhere in raising my child. We're cutting ties with Mom. That's right, we don't need you anymore. Don't come to us for care when you get old. Enraged by Michael and Lisa's appalling behavior, I clenched my fists and shouted, "Gladly! Stay out of my life from now on!" My name is Nancy. I'm a 70-year-old housewife. Until 10 years ago, I worked as a civil servant, so now I live off my retirement allowance and old age pension. I married David, a coworker, after 3 years of dating. Thanks to David, I was able to continue working. Being at work until late on weekdays, I might have made Michael feel lonely compared to other families. But I made sure he lacked nothing, letting him do whatever activities he wished. Not that it's a direct result, but Michael got into a renowned prep school and a prestigious university, eventually landing a job at a major company. David and I thought our parenting was finally over, but Michael soon quit his job and kept hopping from one to another. I was a bit worried about Michael's aimless life, but felt it wasn't my place to intervene once he was an adult. Michael met his wife Lisa at a restaurant where she was working part-time. Her flashy appearance surprised me, but her manners and greetings were impeccable. Turns out, Lisa comes from a wealthy family, and after marrying, she got a job in her parents' company. Believing Michael chose a good person, I happily blessed their marriage. After our family meeting, Michael and Lisa married immediately. Living just a few minutes away on foot, they often came over for meals. Preparing dinner for four after work was hard, but Lisa's charm made it hard to refuse. "Nancy, your cooking is so delicious. I love it. Oh, can we have hamburgers tomorrow? But a bit healthier, please." You don't get anything by flattering me, but all right. I often gave in to Lisa's smooth talk, increasing our food expenses. But we were so close, it made the typical mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict seem impossible. I thought they might be financially tight, but seeing Michael and Lisa in high brands, I ruled out that possibility. Unable to bear the rising food and utility bills, I decided to ask Michael for help. "Since you and Lisa have started coming over daily, our grocery bills have gone up. It's not desperate yet, but it's getting tough. Could you help out a bit?" "What are you saying, Mom? You and Dad are civil servants. You must have plenty of money. And now you want us to pay? That's just low." After Michael's words made me feel like the bad guy, I dropped my complaint. But Michael, perhaps feeling awkward, stopped coming to our house the next day. And honestly, I was relieved both financially and physically, despite the loneliness. Half a year after Michael and Lisa stopped visiting, Michael informed me that they were expecting a child. Lisa was bedridden with morning sickness and asked me for my help with the housework, which I agreed to. Every day after work, I shopped for their needs and did their housework before returning home. It was exhausting, but David's help made it bearable. Each time I saw Lisa, she'd say, "Sorry, and thank you." That made it mentally easier, though she never paid for the things I bought, which bothered me a bit. When I offered to buy some baby items as a gift, Michael sent me a list. All were expensive, and when I asked if just one item would suffice, he insisted on everything. Shocked, I missed the chance to object as David, excited about our first grandchild, bought everything. Lisa just said, "Thank you," once, and things continued as usual. I felt petty for being so sensitive about not being thanked enough, But those baby items did cost a significant amount. Even though both of them were working, it was a large sum. Neither Michael nor Lisa ever struggled with money, so perhaps they were numb to its value. I discussed this with David, who said their financial sense would improve eventually, leaving me to forcibly convince myself. Eventually, Lisa gave birth near her parents' home. I met my grandson Thomas when he was 3 months old. I wanted to visit sooner. Wait until we're home after the birth. She's on edge. But Michael said. So we hadn't met. But I still sent money to Michael. I felt sad not seeing my grandson, but looked forward to it as they sent frequent photos. Nancy, it's been a while. This is Thomas. Please be kind. When Lisa, back from her parents' home, brought Thomas, he was a well-developed baby, and both David and I adored him. Every weekend, following Lisa's suggestions, I bought baby items, completely enamored with Thomas. Then, when Thomas was about to turn 1, Lisa planned to return to work and asked us to look after Thomas until a childcare center was found, and even after, to help with pickups and drop-offs. Wanting more time with Thomas, we agreed. With the start of remote work, David and I could take turns at home caring for Thomas. Michael and Lisa would drop him off in the morning and leave for work, then return after dinner to eat at our place and take Thomas home. Of course, we covered the costs of their dinner and Thomas's diapers. We also paid for all of Thomas's diapers. Despite finding it odd, remembering what happened when we last discussed money, David and I tolerated it to keep seeing Thomas. This arrangement continued until Thomas was in 4th grade. Michael, having briefly worked at Lisa's company, quit and reverted to his old pattern of frequent job changes, never settling into a stable career. This persisted as Thomas grew, but Michael and Lisa had him enrolled in various activities, asking us to cover the tuition. At first, I was reluctant, but seeing Thomas happy with the praise he received, I felt inclined to pay for the tuition for his sake. However, it seemed to embolden Michael and Lisa, as they started asking if we could cover their high school and college expenses too. It appears Lisa's parents had refused to help with her tuition. Thomas's dream school had always been a renowned science university, known for its hefty fees. So why hadn't they saved up in the first place? We're advising scholarships. Pay it back slowly on your own. But instead of understanding, they countered, "Do you intend to watch Thomas struggle with debt?" And so I found myself unjustly blamed. Despite claiming to be unemployed, Michael and the rest always sported high-end brands, hardly looking short on cash. I was unconvinced, but when it's for Thomas's sake, I couldn't firmly refuse and ended up arranging $60,000 for the college fees. "Mom, thanks, as always." Michael's acknowledgement was his usual brief thanks, and Lisa didn't even show her face. But Thomas often visited, helping with household chores. Though Michael and Lisa's attitudes were disheartening, both David and I talked about how it's all worth it for Thomas's future. However, the next day, we were hit with a shocking truth. As Thomas came over to help as usual the day after talking with David, he happily shared what he was learning at college while washing dishes with me. "Really, I'm so glad I got into this college. Actually, Dad and Mom said science was too expensive, but it turns out my grandma decided to pay for it. I feel so lucky to have 2 sets of kind grandparents." "Lisa's parents paid for your tuition?" I interrupted, having never heard such a thing. Thomas nodded affirmatively. However, Michael and Lisa had told us that Lisa's parents refused to assist them. Doubting, I asked Thomas, "Michael's working, right?" "Of course. He said he's been working at Grandpa's company." His answer shocked me, nearly causing me to drop the glass I was holding. Michael's story of repeatedly changing jobs was a complete lie. According to Thomas, it's Lisa's brother who will take over the company, and Michael has been his assistant since before Thomas was born. I also learned that Michael had recently switched to remote work, staying mostly at home. I felt like the world was spinning. To think we had been deceived for nearly 20 years. Grandma, are you okay? Do you feel sick? I'm fine, honey. Sorry, but I need to step out. Can you watch the house? I hurriedly prepared to leave, and then rushed to Michael and Lisa's house, just a few minutes walk away. Upon arrival, I rang the doorbell with vigor. Hello? Nancy? What's up? Can I come in? I need to talk. Lisa, seemingly inconvenienced by my visit, made excuses, but after I insisted loudly, she reluctantly opened the door. She stood blocking the way, not letting me in further. I decided to speak right there. I heard from Thomas. You got tuition from Lisa's parents, too. No, that's... Lisa was visibly flustered. I told her that Thomas said Lisa's parents had arranged for the tuition. She turned pale as she listened, but soon adopted a defiant attitude. As I finished speaking, she fiddled with her hair and smirked. You're not expecting the money back, are you? That's impossible. We've already spent it. On what, if not tuition? Lisa, mockingly, is that your concern? Replied. My anger was about to burst. Ultimately, how we spend the money we receive is our business. What are you talking about? That was for Thomas's benefit, not for you two to squander. My tone must have sounded preachy, as Lisa frowned for a moment before smirking again, pushing me out of the house with a shocking remark. Don't act all high and mighty over just tuition. Her face was the most spiteful I'd ever seen. Hearing her, Michael emerged from the back of the house, joining in with his own scornful smile. Even if it's just tuition, $60,000 is a lot of money. I was astounded by their attitude, as if I was being too strict about money. When I saw a brand new golf bag, likely Michael's, at the entrance, I wondered if I had made a mistake in how I raised them. We're cutting ties with Mom. Yeah, we don't need you anymore. Don't come to us for care when you get old. Their appalling attitude made me clench my fists and yell, Gladly! Stay out of my life! Michael and Lisa maintained their disdainful smiles as they closed the door. I was breathing, my shoulders heaving up and down in anger. I was seething, refusing to be belittled. I decided on a plan for revenge. First, I copied the transfer records from my bank account as soon as I got home. After explaining everything to David, who was waiting at home, he too was furious and immediately started looking for a lawyer. Since we had transferred all the funds to Michael, the records were all in the account. Gathering evidence was easy. Fortunately, we found a lawyer quickly, and after completing some procedures, we headed to Michael's house. 1 week later, the contractors were coming, and going from Michael's house, apparently having bought the vacant lot next door. I rang the doorbell, wondering where the money for all this was coming from. Lisa greeted us with a public smile. Nancy, we cut ties, remember? Why are you here? Despite her words contradicting her smile, I took a deep breath and forced a smile. I didn't want to see your face, but we thought we'd formalize the disownment with a lawyer. Lisa, seeing the lawyer, quietly invited us in. Michael and Thomas were in the living room, but Lisa told Thomas to leave. Once everyone was seated, I began. So, we've decided to sever ties with Michael and Lisa. That means you'll have to sign a disinheritance agreement. Huh? What do you mean? Why do we have to give up the inheritance just because we're cutting ties? Michael was visibly annoyed, not understanding. I sighed. He must have been smart, but instead of knowledge, he may have lost all common sense. I had no choice. I explained in detail. If we're no longer family, there's no reason for you to inherit anything from us. Michael, finally grasping the meaning, turned pale. But then, as if struck by an idea, he spoke confidently. What about your care? You'll struggle without us, right? David and I were civil servants, so we have an old age pension, retirement allowance, and savings. Plus, our mortgage is paid off. We're fine without you. Despite his protests of abandoning our son, David and I were unfazed. Michael eventually signed the papers the lawyer handed him. "All right, Thomas, come in." As I called towards the door, Thomas entered the room. While Michael and Lisa frantically tried to get him out, Thomas sat beside me. That was the cue for the lawyer to present another document to Michael and Lisa. "This document is for the adoption process. Please read it carefully and sign," the lawyer said. "Adoption? Between whom?" Michael, unable to grasp the situation, trembled upon reading the names. "Hey, why is Thomas getting adopted by Mom and Dad?" Michael's angry shout made Lisa hastily peek at the document, and then glare at me. "Nancy, this is too much, even for a spiteful act. He's my precious son." "Precious, huh? Then why don't we hear what Thomas himself thinks?" I suggested, prompting Lisa to look at Thomas. Thomas, with a serious face, slowly began. "I've always considered Grandma and Grandpa as my real parents. Mom's parents have been kind too, but Mom and Dad have only ever used me as a tool for bragging. They never really listened or helped with my career choices. And to think they've been deceiving the people I care about? But Thomas adopting you would upset my parents." Lisa, in a mix of desperation and composure, tried to dissuade him, but Thomas just shook his head and chuckled. "No worries there. I've already talked to your parents, and it's not like our relationship ends." Lisa, at a loss for words, glared at me. "What have you filled Thomas's head with? As a mother, you must understand how this feels. Do you enjoy this?" "I don't enjoy this at all, but this is Thomas's decision." Lisa, dumbfounded, looked at Thomas, who nodded without changing his expression, causing her to slump in despair. Actually, Thomas had followed me that day and heard all of Michael and Lisa's abusive words. On the way back, he expressed his shock, but while gathering evidence, he asked us for adoption. We initially refused, but Thomas had already consulted with Lisa's parents and got their approval, bringing the papers himself. So we agreed. Michael and Lisa seemed stunned by the rebellion of their usually obedient son. Losing their momentum, they signed the adoption papers as Thomas instructed. "Then I'll be moving to Grandma's house this weekend." At Thomas's words, Lisa just nodded, still slumped. After ensuring all the paperwork was complete, we stood to leave, and I said, "Now, Michael and Lisa, we are strangers. I don't expect we'll meet again. Take care." "Mom!" Michael called out to me tearfully, but I didn't respond and looked at Lisa instead. Lisa sat, staring ahead, tears streaming down her face, a stark contrast to her usual assertive demeanor. I didn't relent and delivered one final blow. "By the way, Lisa's parents are aware of this situation. They said they'll come to talk to you later." Lisa looked at me, trembling. Lisa's face turned pale and then flushed as she finally spoke. "Why did you tell them? I'm sorry. Really sorry. I've apologized. Isn't that enough? Tell them it's resolved, please." Apparently, desperate to keep her parents from knowing, Lisa was in a panic. I was dismayed by her lack of remorse. She should have realized the possibility of disownment when Thomas mentioned adoption, but she hadn't. "I have no interest in your apology. Please discuss it with your parents." My dismissive words left Lisa crestfallen. David, Thomas, and I left Michael's house. Later, we heard that Michael and Lisa were disowned by Lisa's parents, too. It seems they were under the impression we were struggling financially and couldn't expect any support, rather needing to provide for us, based on what Lisa had told them. They decided to help, but became suspicious upon seeing the high-end brands. After learning the truth, Lisa's parents demanded the return of their financial support. Michael avoided being fired, but had to repay Lisa's parents with his salary, while Lisa worked to cover their living expenses. The house they lived in, owned by Lisa's parents, was taken back, forcing them into a small, old apartment. Thomas told us, laughing, that they once asked him for help, but he firmly refused and blocked their number. As for us, life has been lively with Thomas joining me and David. His friends come over on weekends, and Thomas even started a business in college. While we don't understand much about computers, listening to Thomas talk about it brings us joy. Thomas plans to stay with us even after graduating. To ensure we're healthy for Thomas, David and I started dieting. We plan to enjoy a peaceful retirement, perhaps with some travel.